Hi, I'm Matt Priour, and I'm going to take y'all on a brief trip into the strange world of high contrast accessibility. I work for Esri. I'm a senior software developer, and you can find me sometimes on Twitter and on GitHub, and there's my email if you want it. Like all journeys, we need to figure out which path we're going on first. And for this one, we're going in that Windows door. It's the only one that really matters for us because it's the only way to get into the high contrast accessibility. So how do we get there? Well, you go to your ease of access settings, and there's a high contrast setting. You click this button, flip the switch, and you're in a totally different thing where the colors that people decided for you don't matter anymore, and it's what you decide are the colors. So we journey this path, and we'll look at it affects the native system, it affects native apps, and then we go onto the web, and we see that things look a little different. The background's all black, the links are all purple, and the text is all yellow. And we'll see this in a lot of places. We go to my investments and look at that, and everything looks pretty normal. I could still use it. It's just weird colors. And YouTube works, but again, just strange colors. But then we go to GitHub, and now we're getting a lot more visual noise than we normally would get. And when we go and look at some of these files, you look into the actual code, and now suddenly you've lost all your syntax highlighting. You don't get any of that. So you get just yellow text on black background, which is really hard to parse once you get into pretty dense stuff. But maybe you want to go to look at maps. And this is a mapping application that I work on with Esri. And you can see that you can still see the map itself and the dots on the map. And this one, everything looks more normal, except for that it's all black and white. But maybe you didn't design for it, and nobody really cares about Wordle these days. But this is a really good example of someplace where every bit of information is in color, but there's no information on this screen other than what you typed in. But you don't have any way of knowing what the right letters were or what you've used because they used color as the main driver of information. And then we can look at some component libraries like Material UI. Here's a card, and we see most of the information on it. And other than the border around it and maybe a box shadow or something like that, it looks pretty normal. Then we go to the switches, and there's nothing there. And we go on to the input validation, and it's really hard to see what you did wrong or what things have errors on them because, again, color was a main driver of that information, and it's all yellow. So what are the rules here in the land of high contrast? So it's actually a forced colors rendering mode. So Windows has certain system colors, and it's going to apply those very aggressively to everything it can and get rid of all the other information, so that you can focus on just seeing the words on the page, essentially, is what it is designed for. And that has some pretty drastic effects. So when you look at how it affects browsers, we've got the system colors, which here you can see text is yellow, hyperlinks are purple, other stuff is green, white. And you can change those if you wanted to change them. to be whatever colors you want. There's several different palettes. There's a white high contrast and a black high contrast default. But for today, we're just going to be looking at the black high contrast, which is kind of the default high contrast. So completely overwritten by these system colors, your text color, all your links and decorations for your links, the background color of every single element, the border color and size, and the outline color and size. And we'll see how those come into play in a little bit. So completely removed, like just gone. You can't see them at all. Box shadows, text shadows, and all your gradient backgrounds. So any background image that's not an actual picture is going to be removed. And then certain browsers like Firefox versus Edge and Chrome do things a little differently. So in Firefox, it turns all your SVGs the same color as the text. And in Edge and Chrome, it actually kind of respects some of the color of the SVGs. And then if you have a black background or a white background, it can also affect the browser's default prefers color scheme. So we'll really look at that. So really what you need to look for is where your information architecture is really based solely on colors and gradients. When that is how you're presenting information to the people that are using your site, you're going to have some serious problems. And box shadows that act as real borders or even real elements can cause problems for users. And that is, we'll see that later. So how do you design for or around the high contrast mode? One, you can detect it. So this is a media query that's been around for several years now. And you can see our forced colors active. So that's the key word here is forced colors. And it's basically got two states. It's got forced colors active or forced colors none. And you can just leave off the forced colors none because that's the default. But here we've got a button, and I'm giving it a 2-pixel solid border, but what's that color? Button text. That's a weird color. I don't know, you're not going to find that on a color wheel. And where it comes from is the system colors of the browser. So it's got these specific names for the colors that get applied to the browser, to the different elements of it. It's got your canvas text and your canvas, so that's the color of the text and then the color of the background. And then it's got like highlight, button color, button text, and other things like that. And you can see how they affect things. And down below, you can see those are SVG icons. And in this example, they're all white. They should be white, black, and red. But I did this in Firefox, and they were all turned white. So what is the top thing for helping out these people that are using high contrast mode? And that is to include a transparent outline anywhere where you're using box shadows to provide significant visual clues. And so here's an example of that. A lot of people like to put a custom focus or focus rings on stuff. And the way they'll do that is like use a box shadow with specific colors and tell it outline none so that the browser doesn't apply its default outline to the focus areas. Instead, if you give it a transparent outline, the normal users won't see anything, but the high contrast users, like I said, it changes the color of those outlines. It will apply a color to those outlines, even though it's supposed to be transparent. It's not going to listen to you in your CSS. It's going to do what it wants to do, which is to render the high contrast colors. And here we've got the material UI switch. And on the left is the one that normal people see. On the right is what you would get if you put a solid transparent outline on it. you suddenly see the thumb and the track, and before there was nothing there at all. So that's how they could fix that in that library. So what about if your background color is a vital part of how you're giving information to people? Well, then you actually need to write the media query and check for force colors, and then give it one of the special system color backgrounds. So like for this example, this is also fixing that material UI button or switch. You can make the track the canvas text, which is in this case would be white. So a selected switch would have a white track and a round knob rather than being completely black like it was before. So there is an escape mode for this. You should really think of this as an option of last resort, but it completely removes all the force color overwrites. And that is force color adjust none. And in cases where you know that you're doing something better, like maybe the Wordle case, where all the information is background colors, and they've even got a special high contrast mode where they use high contrast colors. They could have applied force colors adjust none, and suddenly their site would work again for these high contrast users. So I'm not just going to bash on other people. I work on a library called Calcite Components. And it's a web component-based design system that our company uses. It's open source, but you probably don't want to adopt it unless you want your stuff to look like the way our company wants things to look like. It's to provide a unified experience across our whole platform. We've got lots of different apps and lots of different projects, and want them all to look consistent. So here's progress bars, and here's what it looked like when we did our high contrast accessibility audit on this library. Nothing. You have no idea where your progress is going. So what happened? All the elements that make up the progress bars are just divs with background colors on them. So you have to use system colors because your background color is the important bit of information. So to do this, we just looked again for force colors active, so we know we're in high contrast mode. And then we applied system colors to the track and the bar. And suddenly, you get this, which you can actually see what's going on. Another good example is this date picker. So just a normal calendar date picker, and tried it in high contrast mode. Guess which dates are selected? Try and figure out what is going on with its calendar, and you use it, and it's impossible. So what happened? Well, the first thing that happened is someone thought it'd be really helpful to just add that transparent outline to all the elements. So we didn't have to worry about specifically focused elements, just give a transparent outline to everything and that'll work better for the high contrast people. Well, obviously that is the exact opposite of what you want to do. And then they relied again solely on the background color to indicate selection. There are other ways you could indicate selection. In this case, it was background color, but you don't have to just rely on background colors. So what did I do? I moved the transparent outline to the focus and active states. So it just applied to those things that were active or focused. And then we used the system colors again for the background selection. And here you can see the CSS for that. So again, that 2-pixel solid transparent trick applied correctly to just the focused or active elements, and then a background color selected for high contrast mode. And this is what it looks like. It's not the prettiest thing ever, but it actually works. And people that need this high contrast mode can actually see those colors and interact with it. So, I mean, is it really worth it? Should we care about this high contrast mode? How many people are using it? Well, according to Microsoft and some other sources, there's about 3 to 5% of users are browsing with high contrast mode on. So that's not a lot of people, but it's also not an insignificant amount of people. There's things like older browser support and certain mobile devices and other things like that that have even lower users, and we are jumping through hoops to support those and keep things running on that kind of stuff. So one, yes, there are real people using this. Two, when something is broken for somebody using this mode, it is usually really broken, like the switches or the progress bars or stuff like that we saw, where they can't interact with the elements on the page. They have no idea what's going on. And I think that's a bad thing, to be ignoring people and their needs. So how do you test to see if your site is supporting high contrast mode? Unfortunately, there's no good automated test right now. There are really good automated tests like the Axe tools and other stuff like that to test lots of accessibility issues, but they don't catch the high contrast issues. So you have to either manually test, like on a actual Windows machine, or you can emulate it with a Mac as of last 2021, December 2021. You could do that now. So how do you do it in a Mac? You can open up the DevTools and you can hit Shift-Command-P and start typing in forced colors, and you click that and it will suddenly change your site over to high contrast mode. Or you can add the rendering pane in and scroll down, and you'll find lots of different helpful things like emulating the different prefers contrast modes and prefers the forced colors. So any questions or anything I can ask it? Yes? Yes. Yes, it's hard for me to look at, because I mean it is like really white with just black text, and I don't know, but some people like it, some people use it more, but it does the exact same thing that the black high contrast mode does. It's equally inaccessible for things that haven't been designed with that in mind. And you had a question? Yes, that is a CSS standard, and you can go. There's a MDN page about it that hopefully links to some Microsoft pages as well. But it runs down the spec for it and where you can encounter it and what happens to your browser and how it actually links to the real spec. So if any other browsers or operating systems wanted to implement this, there is a spec. So Mac is not offering this right now. They prefers higher contrast, but it doesn't do the same thing. It just mucks around with the colors and stuff, but in a totally different way, in a way that you can't actually respond to as CSS. Any other questions? Yes?
Or is that like by application? Because for VS Code, I use the high contrast mode, but it's like specifically at the application level. I didn't even know that you could actually do it for the whole OS.
That was based on some figures that they estimated from people using Edge and Internet Explorer. They're a couple years old now. So I would assume that that's for the whole platform, people that actually turn it on for the whole platform. All right. Anything else? One more question. Yes? So you can, when you select the high contrast mode, it actually says, like highlight and hyperlink and text color and stuff like that. And you can modify that theme on your operating system, and then it's going to apply it to all the web pages you visit and all your applications, all your native applications, stuff like that.
Variable names are
The variable names are fixed, and then what color that corresponds to depends on people's systems.